Jai Guru, everyone.
Hey Guru. Welcome to minute 40 of our Awake podcast about the movie Awake, the life of Yogananda. How is everyone doing today? Chris, you're looking sharp today.
Sharp, got my gilet on to protect me from the cold in Northern Ireland. Yeah, no, feeling good. Yeah, happy I'm back, exercising, feeling healthy, eating right, sleeping right, doing my meditations. Life is synchronous at the moment.
Fantastic. Priyank?
Synchronous, very nice. Hopefully I can take a leaf out of your cheery book, Chris. Inspirational book. Yeah, I'm doing okay. Just had a very busy day at work. I'm thankful to be doing some of Guruji's stuff as opposed to work stuff now.
Nice. And we get an interesting minute to talk about today. It is about Guruji giving talks, and it's there's a special focus on willpower. You see different scenes of Guruji giving a talk about willpower, about him being able to stop his pulse, to stop his heart rate on stage. Then you have Brother Jayananda giving a talk about it. And then later on, you also have Brother Chidananda commenting on it. And then you have Bikram Choudhury. And in the end, Vidal closes off the minute. It starts off with a really great picture. It is Guruji talking about, and it's off the back of the last minute, where he talks about sleep and how he could be awake for 3 days or sleep for many hours, just at will. And then you see him lying back on this kind of sofa and looking up, and it's very beautiful. And I was just wondering where he's looking at, if he's looking directly into cosmic consciousness. Do you have any comments on this, Priyank?
Yeah, this one, there's two pictures. One of them where he's like got his arms folded like this and he's looking up. And that one is actually the cover of the film, the film Awake. And so that one is the one that they're using. And I find that when we have pictures of Yogananda when he's looking in this way, and he's not really looking, I feel that he's not really using his eyes. He's like transcended beyond his eyes. So his eyes might be open, but he's actually somewhere else. So I think these two pictures are classic ones where you can see in this minute where he's looking at some point in space, but his eyes aren't what his attention is on. His attention is somewhere completely else.
Yeah, he looks out in the distance, right? Chris?
Yeah, I was thinking myself about those pictures and how magical and wonderful they are. And it reminded me, seeing Yogananda, putting his eyes to Christ conscious center and chanting Om. And when we look at that, speaking for you guys, we know what's going on. We can relate to that. We connect to that moment differently. But there was a loved one, in my life, saw that and had a very different reaction and was very skeptical. Like, what's going on? It's kind of scary. Like, kind of, what's he doing? Having, some kind of seizure, like kind of looking up, had no idea what was happening. And so I try my best to explain, but I think there's, little bridges that are quite difficult to cross if you have zero information on it. So I think just to kind of say, like, we in the SRF group and people who have knowledge of what is maybe happening when Yogananda does use his eyes in certain ways, can see it one way, but it isn't going to be seen by all people that way. And kind of reminds me about what Yogananda was really trying to do, was educate and bring knowledge to people and truth, so that they might learn and develop. But amazing how the same thing can be viewed very different ways.
Yeah, interestingly, you said about the Christ Consciousness Center, because we're taught to do that when we meditate and when we want to focus and think about God, etc., or Guru. But a self-realized person or a Guru or an avatar such as Paramahansa Yogananda doesn't need to look at the Christ Consciousness Center to be in that state of bliss. He can be anywhere, doing anything, looking in any direction, with his spine bent or spine completely straight, right? And to your point about it being scary, I agree. It is a little bit unsettling, but I think that's actually a good thing. It's because it should move you. I think mysticism is something that is the most unknown thing to us, and if it's the most unknown thing to us, then it should scare us. It should shake us, and I think that's theoretically that should be a good sign, because you're not just glossing over something that is meant to impact you, i.e. An avatar such as Guruji entering your conscious, entering your awareness, even videos and pictures of him from 100 years ago.
Yeah, I think he would say himself, if you're traveling to work, for example, don't sit there with your eyes open and looking at the one between Christ consciousness, because it is going to unnerve people. It is going to make people feel uncomfortable. Be respectful of that, right? And it just shows that he is mindful of these things as well. When he teaches us this. So it would be funny if he didn't, and all this people might just be eyes open all the time in meditation, no matter where. I think people would perceive it differently, and that perception is really important in finding common ground with people. Yeah,
there's some paths. I think the Brahma Kumaris is one of them, where they actually meditate with their eyes open. So they've got what they perceive to be like a spiritual eye, but it's got like yellow and red, and then there's a central focus of like brightness in the middle, and I think that's their spiritual eye. But they meditate with their eyes open, focusing on that spot. And people who, like my cousin, who's been a devotee of the Brahma Kumaris for many decades, her eyes are like become a bit like Guruji's. They're you don't want to look straight into her eyes, because there's like they're kind of like out a little bit. I don't know. It's hard to describe.
Don't they have to blink often then? When they
I don't know. I've been to their center, but I didn't want to do their practices, because obviously we're on our own path, so I didn't partake.
I've heard on a slight tangent on this topic though. Again, we've referenced it a lot. Sadhguru was saying that when he went through his I suppose awakening period, he physically changed, right? And his eyes is changed. He didn't look quite the same. So I think it's a super interesting topic, that what is it? Maybe the internal geometric harmony might come out in a different way whenever you have certain energies flowing through, and then that changes your physiology. It's really, really amazing. So maybe there is something to the eyes there, Priyank, with your cousin and that you're mentioning. we need to monitor each other's eyes, check our progress. Kidding.
Rashmi, Ben, if you're listening, we'll have you on the podcast one day.
Yeah, Guruji does say that the eyes are the window into the soul, right? So there's definitely some significance. And I feel like sometimes when people are very, very interiorized or something, you see their eyes, they're a bit more, they become like magnetic or something. They become very powerful. Anyways, let's move on to the next thing. A picture that really fascinates me. It is like Guruji, he's standing next to one of his own posters for his lecture. It says, last free lecture by Swami Yogananda. And then look at Guruji there, how stylish he is. Like he's wearing this coat, he's wearing a scarf, he's like open hair. And I mean, he could even 2022, he could go out on a runway, and this would look super modern, wouldn't it? And I really think he has this look there as well. He's again looking into the distance, and he's again kind of in not interpreting, but he's kind of when it says when his talk is about willpower, he kind of has this perfect pose, that I am strong, I am fearless. I find that a very powerful picture. And then about the topic of willpower. We get some texts that we can read here. One is by Priyank. Do you want to read that one?
Yeah, so this one is actually, I think in a previous minute we talked about when he was in Boston, he issued essentially the energization exercises, but they were back then called Yogoda, or tissue will system of physical perfection. And it starts like this: will is the great dynamo lying within us. The direction of will is the fundamental principle of Yogoda. The more you apply will when asked to do so in the following exercises, the better results you will get. Never forget this. If you neglect this while taking the exercises, you will miss the thing of chief importance. Remember, whenever you direct your will into any part of the body as you tense it, you are sending down a quantity of nerve energy, pranic current, or vital energy from the brain to that part. The greater the flow of this pranic current, the stronger and the better is its action on that particular part, and the greater is the chance of the tissue of that part being revitalized by more rapid circulation and healthier pranic adjustment. Thus, tissues will grow stronger and fresher. In the tension of muscles by will, you turn the pranic current in them. Turn on the pranic current in them. In relaxation, you switch it off. This pranic current, or motor nerve energy, sent down by will, is not only an independent source of power to the muscles and other parts, but it is also a most active agent in bringing about a better adjustment of the tissues. It imparts more life to them too. So remember, while inducing high tension in a muscle or group of muscles, to use maximum will. And I was thinking about this, and I'm comparing it to energization as we have it now in the lessons. And the words are slightly different, but the message is the same. I remember after reading this, like, you know, if you don't use will, you're missing the chief of it, the thing of chief importance in energization. And I remember then I was doing energization this morning. I thought, oh my gosh, I haven't been really focusing on my will as much as I should. So I tried to like re-emphasize my efforts in that regard. But I thought I read the booklet as well that comes with this. It's a fascinating read because it's like the earliest version of the energization exercises that Guruji has given.
I'm curious, are they different in any way from the ones
yes,
that we have in
very
lesson
different.
now?
The exercises so like 75% of the exercises are the same, but they're in different order. But 25% there's different ones. For example, there's ones which like you have to squat.
All right.
So like so you have to like sit down, squat, tense, and then come up and relax your body. So it's so there's a few different ones, and I don't know if I should go into them, because obviously we've been the energization practice lessons have been refined over the decades and years since Master first introduced them generally to the general public.
I wonder how this refinement process worked. If they got feedback from people practicing them, and maybe then they adjusted some of the techniques, or how this worked over the years. I'm pretty sure that the set of exercises we have now, though, they have been the same for a very long time, right? I don't think they have been altered in the past decades.
Yeah, definitely not this past decades, but certainly since 1925, when this first, booklet was released by Guruji, who, by the way, said that the chief, many of these exercises are not new, but the new thing is the application of willpower and energy, and making the use of the dynamo of will, and then using that as a reformation for your body. That is the completely new thing that is unique to Yogoda, or which is now Self-Realization Fellowship.
Fascinating.
Yeah. I've heard about the squatting technique. This was before, but through other practices in other schools, doing Kriya Yoga as well. But it's meant to be an incredibly powerful practice. That it's one of those ones apparently that if the energy isn't really directed appropriately, it can cause all sorts of lower chakra, over propensity in lower chakras, apparently. And I did that actually to help my back for a while, and it was quite a powerful thing. Whether it's the exact same thing, but just interesting to hear you say that.
Was that called Yoga Namaskar, what you were doing for your back by any chance?
It could be. I don't know. It was a YouTube video that I saw. It sounds so derogatory now, but it was again, it was Sadhguru's one years ago. But I'm not sure what the practice was. Maybe somebody listening has done it and knows.
Yeah, I think if it's Sadhguru one, it is the Surya. Sorry, what do I call it? Something Yoga Namaskar. Yes. So you start with this position and you go back, and then you go back and then down, squat. Yes, I did that for about a year as well to try and help my back.
Yeah, did it help?
It's difficult to say because I think I further injured it again. Like I was doing some mountain walking, and then I, like an idiot, tried to run down the mountain, which I did fine, but then the next day I was basically dead.
Spinal cord. Yeah, the one thing you need to take, Ryan. Come on.
I know. I regret it fully.
Yeah, well, I think every now and then we all do things that our bodies can barely still pull off, and then we pay the price later.
What about that time, Mike, that I tried to lift that sack of dirt when we were at my garden, and my legs just collapsed and I fell to the ground? I thought I was 10 times stronger than I was. So I had this maybe 30 kilo thing on my shoulder, and I had to take a step of about 2 feet, and I was like, yeah, that's fine. And I tried to take it in my stride, and I just collapsed to the floor, and the heap of dirt just landed on me, and Mike was dying of laughter. I was in pain. Schadenfreude, Mike.
Yes, I'm guilty of that.
In a similar silly story, I had a 50 kg bag of concrete on my head at one point. I didn't realize how heavy the bag was, and I was watching guys in Brazil carry them on their head, balancing and walking like it was nothing. And I was like, yeah, sure, just pile one on here, and I didn't realize it was 50 kg. And I'm not a big guy, so I don't think I walked straight for about 2 weeks.
At least there's a yogic idea behind it that our willpower can overcome any obstacle, right? So just means that our willpower is not yet strong enough to overcome that one, maybe.
Yeah.
There's another section here that I took from Man's Eternal Quest, and it's also on willpower. And I'm going to read this quickly because it also underlines the importance of willpower on the spiritual path. And it says, will is a tremendous factor in life. It is the power by which you can reach the heights of God realization or go down in the deepest strata of ignorance. The cry of a newborn child is an expression of physiological will. The baby wills to remove the discomfort it feels. Most people have not risen above that state of babyhood. They immediately want to be rid of any discomfort. And whenever they see anything that attracts them, they cry for it. They think they have got to have it, that they can't live without it. The will is thus overpowered by senses. The will that is thus overpowered by senses is called physiological will, baby-bound will, following the dictates of the senses. And this is like one of the things that I find so cool about energization exercises or exercises like that you actually get to direct your will into a certain direction and focus on that. Whereas very often I feel like our will is being used as a reaction to something that we are running after, attracted to, a goal that we're searching for. And so strengthening our will in a conscious way, that is, I think, so powerful. Priyank?
Yeah, absolutely. And I like this conversation because firstly we talked about, our use of will for energy. Swami or Brother Chidananda said, like, will is that which changes thought into energy, and we're doing that in energization in terms of revitalizing our tissue and body parts. And in this he's talking about will to attain to God realization, and that certainly takes the highest level of will, doesn't it? And then he talks about the physiological element of it, i.e. the baby crying, and that's a indication of its own will to remove discomfort, as he says. I never thought of it in that way. It's quite profound, actually, because you just think, I'll stop crying, but you don't realize the baby is actually like has a strong willpower there, and clearly it does, and potentially it could be strongest at that age, in its until it's much older, because growing for a newborn baby and overcoming all those hurdles at the first few weeks and months of birth. Well, I haven't had any children myself, but I can imagine there's some significant development a baby needs to have, both physically, mentally, and spiritually at that age. So it must require immense will.
I like 2 paragraphs above that one, he talks more about this feeling of a baby when it incarnates, and he says that the soul actually figures out that it now has to stay in this body for this incarnation, and that's not a happy prospect, and it will have to go through a lot of struggles in this life. And he also mentions that sometimes when babies after birth, they pranam, and that's kind of the soul praying to God that they will be freed in this lifetime.
Wow, beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's like all kind of things going on when you're being born, I guess, before you get used to the whole human consciousness, and then you forgot all those things that happened to you. You forgot that you came from the astral plane, and all you remember is your human existence. Yeah, go on, Chris.
Yeah, it's just triggering the thoughts of the lessons, and you guys will, I'm sure, be well aware of Yogananda's coverage of will and how it evolves from being a child, an infant, and throughout into your teens and so on. And it's just such a great lesson in life that you can start to appreciate people at different levels of their evolution. And really, there's a lot of wisdom in this fundamental teaching. What is willpower? Why do we have it? How do we use it? It's just such a great thing. So I just wanted to reflect on that. Really, no points to be made, other than I wish more people would have more exposure to this information earlier in life, so that we would have, I suppose, more understanding of each other. I have a story. When I was a kid, I really wanted to dress myself, and I had a nanny at the time, but she, for some reason, really wanted to dress me, and I was throwing a tantrum, saying, no, I'm dressing myself. And I was very independent, as a kid, and she slapped me. I remember she hit me, to say, behave, to do as you're told. And when I was reading the lessons, it made me appreciate, actually, that was my willpower trying to say, I got this, like, I will do this myself. And that, I suppose, if the nanny, or if she had have seen that in that light, I suppose it would have been a very different interaction, because you would have thought, okay, well, give the child a chance. And I suppose you could think of many other reasonable explanations as to why she would simply allow me, but it would have been quite an easier ride. And yeah, I'm sure tons of people have many similar experiences where their willpower was stomped out as a child.
Yeah, I mean, we all remember the stories of Guruji, what kind of child he was when he was young, how he insisted on little things like getting candy or something like this, just so he can have them right now. And I guess the willpower that you bring from your past lives, you still have them as a kid. Yeah. Go on, Priyank.
Yeah.
Yes, Chris, interesting you should raise that point, because I've just been reading about this very topic, and like it rings to me that, you know, when you're born in your mother's womb and there's like 99% dependence on your mother, isn't there? I say 99% because we're going to leave that 1% for soul and spirit and God and all that. It's probably the inverse, but yeah, it feels like, you know, you have almost complete physiological dependence on your mum when you're, you know, just as your conception happens and you know, birth, and then you're born, and then maybe that 99% goes to 90%, and then like you get older and it reduces by say 10% a year, and then when you're in your teens or whatever, however old you are, then there's virtually no dependence. And there's almost that, you know, that classic, that example you gave is a classic one. You want to dress yourself, so you like, that's your will, isn't it? You want to be independent, you want to rely on yourself. And you know, it's like, it's a bit of a you know, as Guruji said at the start of this book, he said, like, or at the start of the autobiography, how did he put it? Like the what did he say? Not like the shame of infancy, but like the something along those lines.
Or the
like
humiliation, right?
The humiliation of of like being helpless. You know, it's quite a deep concept, because we don't want to be helpless. We want to be dependent on no one. We want to depend on ourselves and perhaps only on God. So you go through that process of getting your independence, and interestingly, in India, after 6 months or a year, they take this concept and actually apply it to physiology as well. So you guys probably won't know, but at the age of like 6 months to a year, they shave off the baby's hair. So newborn hair, so they'll let it grow up to that point, and then they'll shave it off. And the theory is that there's a lot of attachment that your body or yourself has had to your mother, but you want to rid yourself of that memory. You want to grow out of that, so you shave off the hair. And similarly, like you'll see my hair is shaved off. Similarly, when a close, or your mother passes away, or your father passes away, and you conduct the funeral rites, after 11 or 13 days, the person who did all the funeral stuff, or the closest one, shaves off their hair. This was like done back in the day, and if you want to read more about this, Sadhguru's written a book called Death, and it goes into some immense detail about this. So he's saying, like, back in the day, like, Indians would have very long hair, even the men. So like, and hair has a very strong retention of like memory. So like the spirit of the deceased, when it needs to move on, so you can do certain things to help it move on. So one of the things you can do is it clings to things that contain memory. So hair is one of them. And if you shave it off and get rid of hair, then that's one way of doing it. And then we have cremation. So obviously that spirit has been living with that body for however many years, or its whole life. So you cremate the body and you disperse the ashes, and you kind of, you know, you want that spirit to move on easily without clinging to this life. You want it to retire to the astral, as Sri Yukteswar described in the autobiography, in The Resurrection of Sri Yukteswar.
Beautiful. I didn't know that, but it makes sense. In that kind of theory, I would like have really little attachment to anything in this.
It is interesting. I mean, when I started getting on this spiritual path, I had short hair at the time, always same haircut since I was a kid, same haircut. And now I've got long hair, and it was one of the things that came naturally to want to do, was to let my hair grow. And then it was a strange kind of thing because it's so stereotypical, isn't it? On people who go into spiritual path, they grow like a man bun, and in the Western world, it's very stereotypical. But I wonder at that of what you said, what the connection is there, because it seems to me that there is.
Yeah, you want to. So if you've established a spiritual life, you want to then retain that memory for that spiritual life. So like there's an element of so you like beards and hair, you'll see yogis don't shave that. They've developed this aura and it supports their whole sadhana. So you want to retain anything that supports. So if you've developed a good habit, a good memory of intense sadhana, then you don't want to then cut that off. Just as they do when babies, when you forget, you'll be losing a part of that by cutting it off.
It's very cool. A good excuse for me that my parents are going to be any happier.
But obviously these are mostly ritualistic things. Being on a path such as we are, where Guruji has taken responsibility for our lives, such rituals aren't really necessary because we're doing the ultimate of rituals, which is Kriya, and that really takes precedent over all these outward shows and symbols and such more gross ways of spiritual life, really.
Yeah, for sure. Chris, you added another section there.
Yeah, it was something that when I was thinking about willpower, I was thinking of Guruji, the story where he spoke the words to his sister about the boil, which appeared on her arm, and his mother then says, hey, be careful, because your words really have meaning, they have power behind them. And I looked up in autobiography, there was a great little bit here in that I think represents what was happening there. And it says the infinite potencies of sound derive from the creative word Om, the cosmic vibratory power behind all atomic energies. Any word spoken with clear realization and deep concentration has a materializing value. That just blew my mind when I read it. We talk about the human being created in the image of God, and I suppose in a way then the spoken word might well be a divine, as everything I suppose is, but there's great divinity in the spoken word if it's done through these methods. And Yogananda found that out early on to his sister's dismay, I think. So yeah, there's so many stories like that, and you can tell when somebody has real deep concentration, which is what we're sort of loosely talking about here. Concentration and willpower, two different things, but it can be used for good, but it can be used for bad as well, and very, very powerful thing to be mindful of in your daily interactions with people. Words have meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're kind of an expression of our willpower as well, right? Out into the world. Nice. So as we're moving on, the next thing that happens is you have Brother Jayananda telling a story about Guruji being on stage, and he has I think he says there's 6 people lining up on stage in front of Guruji and pushing against him, and he does a quick movement and they go flying off the stage, basically. This is a demonstration of Guruji of physical strength. And as Priyank researched, this is from a talk that is also available on YouTube on the SRF channel. It's called Living Fearlessly, Overcoming the Causes of Stress and Worry by Brother Jayananda. And Priyank, what do you think about this?
Yeah, we'll put that link online. Brother Jayananda, incidentally, has now been an SRF monk for 40 years. So, and in the last convocation, he also gave a talk as well. So he's obviously a very senior monk. He's lectured throughout the US and Europe, and he mentors novice monks that first come to the ashram. So he's very senior in that regard. So he's a very nice addition to this film. But yeah, I really like this this story. It's quite funny, especially how Brother Jayananda says it. But you can almost imagine this happening, can't you? And he would have had to have done this back in the day, because he has to kind of retain the attention, I suppose. Because if you're talking about willpower and energy and consciousness and things like that, then you can imagine some people just dozing off, or people that aren't that aware of such things, they could be go over their heads. But if in the middle of that talk he just says, okay, I can see you guys nodding off now, 6 of you guys come up here, and then he just does this trick, and it would just wake everyone's attention would be like right there, isn't it? And like they say, like when someone's giving a speech or a talk and they're reading off a paper, like their attention is like not even like 10% or something, right? People just not even thinking about, they're just losing their attention. But if you do practical, if you're reading or if you're talking through experience and you're doing a practical demonstration, then like that probably inverses, and it's over 90% attention. Everyone's focused, and I can sense that is the kind of thing that would have happened. And then you can imagine the next thing that he said after all these men went away, and the humor had died down, would have really been hard hitting, because he would have had everyone's attention.
I agree, and I feel like that back then this knowledge of yoga wasn't so established as it is now. So maybe it took a few demonstrations as well to kind of show people that there's a lot of truth in there. It's very powerful, and without the demonstration, maybe some of the people would not have been convinced to try it out themselves.
Yeah, it's a funny one. Whenever you think of the materialization of powers and how people really need to see it to believe it. So there's probably an element of Guruji saying, well, this probably would cause some people to sit up and take heed, and maybe needed at a time when potentially people were more stubborn or less willing to kind of open their minds to it, potentially. I'm curious, how do you guys think he actually did this? Is it transferring literally of energy through his belly into the finger? Is it how do you theorize how he actually pulled it off? Any thoughts? Like,
so I couldn't do it, so I don't really know. I imagine he can probably change his weight, and he probably made himself very heavy, and he can probably also be infinitely strong if he wants to be. So I'm guessing a combination of the two, maybe.
Using some of the powers of the cities.
Yes. And while Brother Jayananda is talking about this, we see a shot of an auditorium, like a black and white shot, where Guruji is on stage, and he's wearing a turban, and I think there's some lady there sitting next to him. It's obviously not that scene of the 6 people, but I guess it's meant as an illustration that it must have been a stage like this. And you also see a picture of the audience reacting, laughing, and that was interesting to me, that shot of the audience, because for me, when you're sitting there like this, I feel like they were more looking at a spectacle than in deep spiritual trance when they were listening to him. So I feel like maybe that's also why Guruji didn't do those talks for many years. He did this for a while, this roadshow, to get attention. But I feel like a lot of the spectators there, they came to see a show. They didn't primarily come, or at least that was my impression of it, that to actually go deep, go within. They were maybe not spiritual seekers, at least at the get-go. What do you think about that, Priyank?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you imagine, the kind of posters that he had, like, the science of, God realization, or like the key to hidden power, and, all those fantastical kind of like headings he had for his talks, he would have, say he had 1,000 people that came, if he got, say, 5% of those people and they actually connected, that's 50 people, 50 people from one talk essentially becoming devotees. Now that would be quite a good ratio, wouldn't it? So the other 95% could have just come and gone, but he was actually there for those 50 people, and those 50 people, in essence, they didn't care, they didn't mind about, they didn't come here for those little demonstrations of, demonstrations of yoga power, but they were moved by that, that he no doubt he would have done even a few minutes of meditation, or and that's what would have captured their imaginations, and they would have taken that forward in their lives, and that those 50 people would have been the devotees that he's actually after.
No, I completely agree, and maybe your ratio is even generous. but he definitely created some buzz going through the whole country like this, and maybe like it was like him being God's willpower, awakening the energy everywhere he went, which is also something that needs to be done, I guess, in the beginning to create momentum. And I'm moving on now in the minute. The next person that is talking is Bikram Choudhury, and he's also talking about the importance of concentration, and he talks about you meditate, and in meditation you generate this willpower, and this willpower lets you do things then. Bikram Choudhury is a bit of a controversial figure definitely in the last few years, and so I don't want to weigh in on that really, but do you guys have any comments, Priyank?
Yeah, so he says, like, part of that, he said you meditate to achieve concentration powers. I'm just wondering if that's true for me. I don't think it is. That's a nice benefit, having concentration, but I would say that's just that's not even a requisite requirement for me as a benefit of the meditation. The purpose of the meditation is to connect with God and to offer yourself to God through, the devotional element of it, and anything that any boon that God gives you as a consequence of your practice is really just that, just a benefit in kind. It's not it's not the be all and end all.
No, I agree. Chris?
Yeah, I when I first heard this, I was going to say the same thing as Priyank. It struck me like, oh, that didn't seem right, did it? And concentration is, from what Yogananda says, it's simply it's a tool to use to go deeper into meditation. That's the way I kind of understood concentration. You must build your concentration so that you can go deeper in meditation. But it's interesting on this topic again, the variables that people maybe have on what meditation is, and how to use meditation. And the Western world, I think we have probably 1,000 more than maybe what there should be on this. But maybe it's probably a lot more of a pure, to what you said, Priyank, is the truth in the matter. But yeah.
And he also says, Brother Jayananda in one of his talks, I think it was the loyalty one, Guruji once told him, or like when he was doing his writings in the desert, Guruji would often just come to him and say to him, practice Kriya with deep concentration. And then Brother Jayananda would say, like, I don't have Kriya yet. When will you give it to me? And then he says, soon now. And then that would happen often, and obviously there's some deeper meaning in that, and you can listen to that talk. It's a beautiful talk. But just listen to the words, practice Kriya with deep concentration. So you're actually using concentration to practice Kriya, and so like to do it effectively, therefore then you need to develop your concentration skills. So they kind of go hand in hand. But yeah, I always like to remind myself of that line that Guruji gave Brother Anandamayi before I practice my techniques.
There's a line, if I can say, in the autobiography of a yogi, again on this, that Yogananda was saying that if any invisible barrier rose in the path of my concentration, I would meditate at the Guru's feet. There, the most tenuous states came easily within my grasp. And I thought that was an interesting point to say that, well, if he couldn't quite get concentration in his own meditation, he was able to kind of, piggyback, so to speak, on the aura of pure concentration in his Guru's feet. So if ever I find myself, not concentrating, I'm going to certainly call upon Guruji more and pray at his feet and take inspiration from this line.
Absolutely. It reminds me that I was at Lake Shrine the other day and listened to the talk by the monk, and one of the things he said was that it's a tremendous act of willpower to go deep in meditation and see the spiritual eye, and that's one of the reasons why it takes so long, because you have to train your will to become strong and to actually go into those deep states. And I'm moving on in a minute now. Then the last part is Mas Vidal talking about Guruji's ability to control his heartbeat and his pulse, and having the complete control of his life energy and of his body, and being a complete master of his physical presence. And that kind of underlines what we heard earlier, like how he could change his weight or how he could be very strong. And then I saw Priyank added a link about something called the Lazarus syndrome. What is that, Priyank?
Yeah, I thought I'd discuss this briefly. So we have instances where people would they'd stop breathing and that their heart rate would stop, and doctors usually classify that as a death of a person. But then sometimes they come back, and then apparently when this happens, it's called the Lazarus syndrome. And the Lazarus taken from the Bible, where Christ raised Lazarus's body from his tomb, or from his grave, when after 4 days of his death, and he raised him up just so people would believe, as it were. And I looked it up, and the reason this came up for me recently in the past, I was telling you, I was reading the death book, and we were finding some solace in that, my family and I. But one of my brother-in-law, who's kind of a science, just pure science, if it's not proven by science, I'm not believing in anything kind of person. And in Sadhguru's book, he says prana exits the body very slowly, and because of that, death isn't death until some time later. And then I looked up this Lazarus syndrome, and actually what happened, there's actually an instance where there was this lady, and she was for 17 hours she was declared dead by the doctors. This is the record. And then for some reason she came back to life after 17 hours, and her son said, like, her skin had started wilting, and her, all the signs of a decaying body, but she came back. And Sadhguru in his death book, he writes that obviously the prana exits slowly, and sometimes it can be revived through various processes that happen. And he was saying in the book, like, for example, people that die because the prana hasn't yet exited, their skin and their nails and their hair would continue to grow, And he said this is only slightly due to the contraction of the skin because of loss of moisture, etc. It's also because of this prana effect. So anyways, my brother-in-law was saying, no, scientifically that's impossible. It's all down to the contraction of, the moisture and this contraction of the skin. So it looks like the skin, the hair and the nails are growing. And I was like, all this other stuff in the book about prana, atma, karma, you're glossing over the most important elements and you're focusing on this one minute detail. So then I did some looking up. So I found this Lazarus syndrome, and I said, what in this case of this 17-hour death, would this lady's hair have stopped growing? Would her nails have stopped growing? So I don't know. And I was like, show me the scientific paper that says like it's 100% down to the contraction of skin and moisture. And that's not available because no one does research on such topics, do they? First of all, you have such rare conditions. It is very rare that this happens, so it's virtually unscientifically provable. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. But because the reason I thought of it is because of the control of heart rate and pulse. And we know, like Guruji, for example, after he passed, like he showed absolutely no signs of decay, doesn't he? Immutability, the coroner said.
Yeah.
My mum.
Go on, Chris.
My mum was just asking me on this point because she's a Roman Catholic, and I think in their faith it's very important that if a saintly individual was to pass, to see if their body would decay kind of quickly. Like they say that like this is a sign of divinity, and obviously Yogananda had that. So. Very, very interesting to see from her perspective, and it was kind of a nice little bridge of a conversation between the two of us into more topics of Eastern philosophy, let's say. But yeah,
and I find that super interesting because I like the whole idea where science meets metaphysical ideas, and I'm pretty sure that at the end of the day they will meet at the same point, right? But as long as they seem far apart, and especially in the West, we have a hard time using the church as an input for scientific processes. So as long as that isn't happening, there's going to be some interesting discussions to be had, and
my sister. Sorry, finish. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's good. And maybe that's how our consciousness will widen eventually to encompass both.
So my sister started heavily reading the autobiography of Yogi after all these events in our family, and she's like, how my husband or my brother-in-law, like how people expected to believe about levitation and all the other crazy stuff that's in the autobiography of Yogi. And I said, like, firstly, it's explained in the chapter The Law of Miracles. Secondly, it's not up to yogis to provide scientific evidence for anything. It's up to them whether or not they go down that field. It's up to the scientists to do that. That's their interest. Just because they haven't provided evidence, like a video or an explanation or a formula showing how they did it, doesn't mean that it's not true. So I told my brother-in-law, like, if I say I can levitate, you can't tell me that I can't. You can only say, maybe you can. I don't know if you can or can't. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think Sri Yukteswar, with his amazing eloquence, says that at some point that if the laws of the universe were bound by you believing in them, then nothing would work in the universe.
That's what I said to him. Like I said to him, like I poked him in the chest, my brother-in-law. I said, why doesn't my finger go through your body? And he said, because physical objects. I was like, yeah, but we're 99.9% empty space. You're 99.9% empty space. And we should go through each other. There's no explanation for it.
That's fun.
The point that you made there, Prank, was nice about there's no scientific studies really on the, because there's no like what money.
Yeah, exactly.
I would be not to be too cynical, and there probably is a lot really in there, but yeah, it's a time and a place. And I talk about the yugas probably more than the two of you, but time and a place really, isn't it? It's maybe not the right time. Sadhguru mentioned he got hooked up to lots of wires and did similar sort of things and regretted it in a way, or at least said that he wouldn't do it again, because the way it's used thereafter is it could be again used for bad interpretation. So there might well be a time where, like as you say, maybe it comes full circle, and it's hand in hand, spirituality and science. But
yeah, they were checking his gamma rays, if I remember. I remember that talk, and then they came back hurriedly and they said, according to our charts, you're dead.
Yeah, he was in like a blissful samadhi state or something.
Yeah,
They were trying to wake him up, hitting him with metal objects.
Oh God.
But if Yogananda was here today, I thought to myself, I wonder would he put himself through the rigmarole of scientific study? Because it's anecdotal. He's showing people, you can do things, but I wonder would he go the extra step in this day and age?
I feel like in our days today, he would have to do less, because our consciousness is already understanding energy and things like that. I feel like the need for miracles is much less now than it maybe is in a darker age. Maybe I'm wrong.
Possibly.
No, I think the need of miracles is the same, but I think the more miracles like you produce, like even now, like God could obviously show his manifest. He can manifest himself to any of us at any time, and that would be a miracle, right? But then where's your God? Is remove your free will, because then all your doubts, belief systems are gone, because there's no point in the creation, is there? You're meant to discover and find God yourself. But if he just manifests himself to you through a miracle, then that just doesn't make sense. The life process doesn't make any sense. There's no development there.
Yeah, it's experiential, not theoretical. The way I think about it, like, what's the point of knowing things, to be true? But if you can't experience them yourself and get there, it's like,
the journey.
Yeah, and maybe at some point you have this really good karma to see a miracle, and you go like, yes. Yeah.
Well, all the more sweet for it, deserving. Yeah,
absolutely.
And when you do, you will probably not want to share them.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Well,
yeah,
I did have this conversation, funny enough, last week with a loved one, and I said, look, even if God were to manifest, himself to you, in what way would that have to be for you to maybe even believe it or do something with it? Because I think you could give somebody, my point at the time was, you could give somebody truth, but if they're not ready to receive the truth or willing to even consider truth, it's going to fall on deaf ears. So it's more power to the person for being part of divinity and to have their own willpower to experience the way they want to experience, creation. And I suppose, there's no point hitting somebody with truth over and over again if they're just going to be blind to it. Do you know what I mean in that sense? So I think it's all about, the selfishness in a way, all about yourself and everybody else's self, to be able to work on themselves to find the truth. Basically what I was thinking about, like you can't go around saving people, and with the manifestations of showing great power that Yogananda probably could well do, you probably realize that maybe fruitless to a good extent, as we probably mentioned earlier on the recording, but waste of energy, put it into divine meditation instead.
Exactly. I think that's kind of what Guruji would always do. He would point us back to meditate more and find the truth like that. All right, so this concludes minute 40. We went from the beginning, where we saw Guruji on stage, all the way down to now Mas Vidal having commented on it. I think we did a pretty good job summarizing and talking about the points of willpower and talking about the different characters. Is there anything else you guys would like to add?
Nothing from me. Very enjoyable episode. We thought this was going to be a short one.
Yes, we always think so.
I sense we had to cut the conversation short at various times.
Yeah, nothing for me. Super critical element of what Yogananda talks about. So really great to see that they included it in more detail in the documentary.
Which bit in more detail? Sorry.
The willpower and concentration.
Nice. I thought you were just doing a general management spiel talk, like this is good.
They did their homework and they got to the crux of some of Yogananda's teachings. Really, it was really nice work.
Nice.
By the guys.
Nice.
Great. All right, then thank you all for joining, and Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.